Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for an episode with some of America's premier architectural photographers. Today's broadcast comes from a recent Zoom meeting of the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This discussion is led by AIAP Director Alan Blakely. We hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. Now, on with the show.
Let's kind of jump into this. I don't have any kind of a scripted outline for this, and my voice is not going to last very long. I had neck surgery 4 weeks ago, and my voice won't last very long. So I hope that you'll feel free to kind of lead this and let me know where this needs to go. Is everyone here? There's not anybody shooting film anymore, is there? I know the last time I brought this up, there was one guy shooting film, and he felt very offended that I made the assumption that we were all digital. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I'm going to go get mine.
This is the first film camera. I just bought this off a guy on Facebook for $100. It is the first time in 15 years that I have thought about shooting film, because this is the OM1, the original, and this was the first decent camera I ever used and ever owned. So,
me too.
But I don't think I'll be taking it on to a location anytime soon.
No. Yeah, I had an OM1 as well. Actually, I had a couple of them, and they thoroughly disintegrated. But they were they were good cameras to learn on.
This one, anyway. Yeah.
So
I still enjoy shooting film for personal work.
I think that's not uncommon.
Yeah, I mean,
one of the things in schools, they still teach film quite a bit.
Yeah,
partly
like that's even increasing.
Yeah, I think it is increasing. It's partly because kids want it. But the other side of that is that fine art and wedding photographers shoot a lot of film, but it's also because a lot of the people that teach are not working professionals in a commercial or editorial sense. So they come out of a fine art background. And I mean, I talk about this when I teach professional practices. I tell my students, I kind of pull back the curtain and I say a lot of the people that teach have master's degrees because they knew they'd never make a living as a fine art photographer. And writers, poets, painters, they all do this, or it's a give back. So,
so tactful.
Yeah. So there's no shame in it, but that means that the educational past, the technical stuff there's going to be a lack that would be valuable once they graduate, if they or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just as far as workflow goes, I'm making the assumption that most of everybody's using Lightroom and Photoshop and going that route.
CaptureOne.
Okay.
I use CaptureOne too.
CaptureOne. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As far as your capture software, I've never used Lightroom for a capture software, but I understand a lot of people do. So
up until just a couple of days ago, I never even fired up Lightroom. I never used it.
Oh, okay.
Do all the folks using CaptureOne, you tether everything to a laptop?
Mm-hmm. No, I used to, not anymore. Now I use CamRanger.
Yeah.
So I use CamRanger 2, and I shoot that to either shoot to the SD card, and I use all the live previews and the previews to either I usually shoot from my phone, and I give the client the iPad and set the iPad up for client mode so that they just get the images pop in, and then they can wander around, grab coffee, whatever they want to do. I don't do any editing at all on set, none at all.
Not either, but
I just bracket everything and just let them pick what they want from that.
I find that CamRanger has been just as solid as it can be. That's what I do too. And I shoot an iPad that's on a tripod so that people can stand around and review it if they have to. And it really almost never fails.
It's made my life so much easier. Like
Yeah.
the amount of times I've kicked laptops off of stands and, put cables around tripods trying to move stuff about. It just frees everything up so much. And I just bought one of those giant Gitstos as well, with I don't know how big it is, like 13 or 15 feet. So you can just shoot the thing up over all the traffic or whatever if you're in the street and, just fire it off from the top of there so that the live preview is great.
Wow.
Do you ever run? So I do the same. I shoot to CamRanger. I very few projects do I lug around like a laptop on a stand anymore. Mm-hmm. But do you sometimes I do run into clients who have a difficult time visualizing what we're going to end up with, right? If something if the dynamic range is just too extreme and the image does really have a long way to go. Sometimes clients sort of struggle. Clients that have worked with me kind of are just like, yeah, we know it's going to be fine. But first time clients, if they're not used to it, do you guys run into that at all, or it's not an issue?
I run into it constantly, personally.
I don't use any of that at all. I don't show anybody anything until I'm done shooting, and then I process it. And I don't show anything on set.
What if there's like an art director or a stylist?
They can look through the viewfinder of the camera if they want to see the composition, but I don't do anything. I really don't. I don't show them anything.
I think that is one of the advantages of CamRanger, though, is that they can see that live view and make adjustments.
I couldn't live without the live
physically,
view.
Yeah. It's been such a lifesaver for me because my wife works as the stylist usually, and so she could be walking through the set and looking at things. And
that's the thing that I found as well, especially when you're using things like the 17mm TSE. Yeah. It's so wide and it has its own inherent distortion that what they see from standing behind you, behind the tripod, can sometimes look absolutely nothing like what the camera's seeing.
Yeah.
So giving them the iPad and being able to have them physically walk into the shot and move it and see what the camera's going to see is great.
Well, the other part of the CamRanger too is that you can email right out of it. I had a project where essentially the art director was on the East Coast. So I would take a shot, email it to her, and she'd say, move that chair 4 inches to the left. And we just did that for about a half an hour until I got the shot that she wanted. And then she was happy and signed off on it on an email. So I had a written record that she was happy. I'm paranoid enough that I love a written record.
Is there anybody that does? I run into that situation where my client's not there a lot, and is anybody live streaming as a solution to that?
I literally will take a picture. I just had this the other day. There was a couple questions I had. I do test shots and scouts and everything, but there were a couple. I probably should have been more thorough reviewing stuff with the client, but I had some questions. I literally was taking photos of my iPad with my phone and texting him and saying, do you want the stairs in this shot? Do you want this wider? Little things like that. But that's as close as I come to live streaming anything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like Barry was saying, is being able to use the CamRanger and just be able to hit share straight from that and send it straight to it just opens up your email or your text or whatever it is and just shoot that off to the client. I have a bunch of stuff where I have people in different sides of the country and they'll just get a text or an email when I'm kind of, I'll hit them up partway through, say, are we in the right direction with this stuff? But a lot of my people don't really kind of hold it over me on every shot, want to sign on off of every shot as we go. They just kind of let me do what I do. And I'll just kind of say, here's a average exposure of the entire shot. Well, obviously we'll get the lights back, we'll get the windows back, whatever, all that sort of stuff. And they sign off straight from that.
I think especially if you've got a client you've worked with a lot, there's that level of trust where they're not too worried about whether or not you get the shot or not, that if they see that CamRanger preview. That occurs to me. I've been in touch with the developer of CamRanger off and on over the last year or so with some firmware requests. Is there anything about CamRanger that you would change or that you would like to see changed? I'm just curious.
I've sent them like kind of a laundry list of very mostly little things, right?
Yeah.
But I switched from Nikon to Canon, and I found it works better with my D850 than it does with my R5.
Mhm.
I get like, does anybody get like, I get like error messages a lot when I'm bracketing. I don't know if anybody gets that if they shoot Canon.
Yeah, and see, that's where I've been in touch with them. I don't know if anybody ever used the Arsenal camera assistant. It was kind of like a CamRanger. It's still out there. It doesn't. It's a pretty sleek little thing, but it doesn't give you the variety of options that the CamRanger does. But one of the things it does that I really liked is when I was bracketing, is that it locked up the mirror and kept it locked up for the bracket sequence, which gave me a noticeable difference in sharpness. And I can't get the CamRanger to do that. And the developer gave me some instructions on how to do it, and I still can't get it to work that way. But to me, that would be huge, as if it would lock that mirror up and keep it locked up for the duration of the sequence, however long that may be.
The trick is, Alan, you get a camera with no mirror in
it. Like a camera.
Not really a camera.
Well, the R5 is, I haven't used it. I'm trying to justify, I'm desperately looking for a reason to force myself to buy it. I shoot with a 5 DSR, but that R5 sounds like a really superior piece of equipment.
I mean, you can make anything work, right? It's not a big deal, but like I had a D850 and I switched to a 5 DSR and I looked at one file and I like threw that thing out the window and got an R5. Like the dynamic range and like just like you can't do anything with a 5 DSR file, which again, if you're bracketing in your workflow, you may not care and it may not be necessarily like everybody shoots with a 5 DSR, but the quality of the files is like night and day as far as like pushing and pulling, which may not be relevant to your workflow, but
it is.
I just, the best thing about the mirrorless is I just have the adapter that has the polarizer in between the lens and the camera. So I don't have to like mess around with like filter adapters and all that. That's to me like the biggest advantage of shooting with the mirrorless.
And whose adapter is that?
Canon.
Is it Canon?
Yep.
I haven't looked into that camera very much, quite honestly, because I'm so used to using the 5 DSR, but I can see that it's got some really significant advantages.
And filter holders. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Barry.
Well, that filter holder is also for like ND filters, right? If you're going to be
put anything in there, yeah.
Yeah, because it's that camera will shoot decent video as well.
For me, it's a downside because I don't do any video. So you're paying $4,000, 2,500 of it is really for the video, right? So it's a bit of a waste of money, but I'm hoping, when whatever their R5S comes out, I'll get rid of the R5 and go to that, but we'll see.
What is the R5S?
It's supposed to be like a 90 megapixel camera from Canon.
Holy shit.
We'll see if Sony or Canon, they've all have, there's a lot of rumors of this. I think Sony will probably be the first to it. Does anybody shoot Canon lenses to Sony bodies?
I shoot Sony lenses, Sony bodies.
Really?
What body?
You have no shifting?
No, I don't have any problem with it. I mean, I shoot, I've got a 7R2 mirrorless, which I don't care for. I don't like the mirrorless viewfinder.
Yeah, I don't either.
I've got some old A900s that I shoot with all the time. I use mirror lockup. My favorite lens to use on that camera is a Minolta 20 millimeter, and it's phenomenal. It's sharp, tack sharp, and it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's interesting.
You have good dynamic range in that camera as well,
It has excellent dynamic range.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I have an A6500 that is my sort of walk around camera, and I've been very impressed with that. And
there's another photographer that works with me. He's got the 7R4 that came out, 61 megapixels. That's a phenomenal camera. I mean, the dynamic range in that is unbelievable. Yeah. And the ISO range it's incredible. It's tempting, but then again, I just don't care for an electronic viewfinder. And I've never had any application where I've needed more than a 5 megapixel file. I mean, we do artwork here all the time, and I've never had anybody ask for anything larger than a 20 by 30. So it's worked out nice with me. This is a discussion I'm really going to be listening more than anything, because I guarantee I do things a lot harder than all of you. I really do, because I'm an old, I started with Photoshop. I do everything. I fired it up the other day. I'm like, I don't understand it. I don't see the benefit, I guess. So I'm going to do a lot of listening today.
Well, I use Lightroom. I'm CaptureOne person.
Yeah, I don't care for CaptureOne. I don't like things that slow me down on the shoot. My clients all trust me. If they have a spread they need for digest or Lux or CS Interiors, they'll tell me what they need, and I'll get it for them. But I haven't. It's probably been 3 or 4 years since I've been on a shoot where I had to tether something, an art director, and I don't like that. It's very restrictive, and it slows down the creative, I think. But, yeah.
Well, I will make one pitch for shooting tethering, at least CamRanger, which is, if nothing else, you can check focus. Because I still can focus by eye, but I don't trust myself. And if 8 out of 10 shots are in focus, that's great. But those are the ones you're going to need. And so I love being able to do that.
Yeah, I manual focus everything. I have no issue with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's move on from the capture end of things into where those files start. And I'd like to kind of hear your different production techniques. I personally dump everything into Lightroom, and then we'll edit out the things that I'm not going to do from there. But then I will a lot of times batch process my brackets through Aurora, given a preset for that particular job that I've created. And then they go back into Lightroom and I do some tweaking again, and then they go into Photoshop for final revisions before I deliver.
What is Aurora? Is that a plugin or is that a standalone? I'm not familiar with it.
Well, it works it's both. It has a Lightroom plugin, but it also works as a standalone where you can batch process. You have to kind of pull it back a little bit because it tends to really oversaturate and give more contrast than you need, and so you have to not just let it do its own thing. You'll have to set some presets on it. But for me, it'll pull more out of the shadows and highlights than Cinematics or Lightroom will, as far as blending brackets. And so I use that for a lot of things. There are some things though that it just fails terribly on, and I'll go into another HDR type program and go from there. But for most things, it works really well for me.
Yeah, it's got no lens distortion correction, which I think is a real downfall for that software. I have it. I use it once in a while.
For any lens distortion, after I've batched it through Aurora, then I'll take it back into Lightroom and correct any distortion there, because there are some things like gradient and radial filters and things like that I need to use in Lightroom after I've blended those images together. I do send out stuff when I know it's not something really critical. If it's, say, exteriors or aerials, I'll send those out and have those blended elsewhere, just to save me the time.
I have three blending softwares that I use. The one in Lightroom is the one I use the most, called Infuse. Which I think I've talked about that before here. I like it because I can take each image, modify it for temperature. I can do dodge and burn. I can change the temperature of the sky. I can do all kinds of things, slam them, and in challenging environments, can get a pretty decent photo. But when that work, I either use the HDR inside Lightroom, which is okay, and then for Christ's sake, I'm going to look it up right now and tell you. But it's the original one, Pixel something or another here. And between those three, I get a decent result of, doing exteriors or even interiors with big windows. If there's plants moving around, it'll take care of the ghosting.
Yeah. That's always really nice.
Yeah.
I also use the ghosting options on there because I, like all of you, I've got architects and designers who like to see blurry figures in the shot. So I will use that. I don't pay too much attention to how blurry they are on the capture necessarily, within reason. I try, I know what's going to work and what isn't, but then I can fine tune that amount of blur with those figures in like Aurora or whatever.
Photomatics, by the way, is the one the name I was trying to remember.
Photomatics, yeah.
Yeah, it's a much better program than it.
And there are some things that for me, I go back to Photomatics because it's the only one that works in some unique situations for me. Especially if I'm in an industrial situation with really odd lights, it tends to figure that out better than the other programs. Easy HDR is another one that has some unique.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Easy HDR is my favorite. To me, if you're doing a blend, it looks more like a photograph when you're done than Photomatics. I can look at any picture and tell you if it was done with Photomatics. It's got a character to it. And Aurora less so, but Easy HDR is to me is the truest thing to have. If you're not working straight and raw, that's a good program. Yeah.
Is anybody sending everything out here? I mean, is there anybody that's not doing?
I do everything in-house.
Okay.
Yeah, I do my own post. Well, unless I run into a situation where it's more complicated than know how to do.
Yeah,
I never really got good at the marching ants as good as I should. It's neurotic. I admit it, but no, I do 99% of everything myself.
Yeah.
Mostly what I send out is when I have either objects that need to be removed or objects that need to be added. Those kinds of things. I'm not good at that, and I'm not going to burn up a half a day doing something that some nice little lady in India can do in 5 minutes.
So what is the? I'm always trying to have something in my back pocket about people like that do clipping services and stuff. Which one do you use that you like?
I use Pro Image Experts.
Pro Image?
Yeah, Pro Image Experts. They're very reliable. And the other one I use is Image Solutions India. And between the two of them, I can usually get most things done. Pro Image Experts does an overall better job. They're a little more expensive. Image Solutions India will do, as far as custom retouch, they do some really nice stuff where I need something, just really complicated retouch, little things removed and changed and moved and stuff I would not even want to attempt. And they get it back to me overnight. So between the two of those, but I've used at least a dozen others with terrible results. So those are the two. I mean, and I just sent one of my clients to Pro Experts, and they had a really complicated job that was stainless steel kitchens, and which is just a nightmare. And I did the best I could to minimize reflections and lasers and all kinds of things on the stainless, and it still wasn't right. And so they sent it over there, and it came back perfect. And I think that they had 40 images. I think they paid $200.
Wow.
So
what's the math on that?
Can I ask a question here? Brian Dressler from South Carolina. How's everyone? I've been in and out of the camera because I'm meeting some deadlines and having to trim some prints and stuff. So I wanted to say hello to everybody and thank you for this great group of people to share openly share. Let me ask you, Alan, do you use Pro Image Experts for blending images or for clipping paths or both or for everything or what?
For both.
Okay. And what was the other one that's in India? You said something solutions?
Image Solutions India. Yeah.
Image Solutions India. Okay. And they, their forte is what?
I think custom retouch is probably what they do best.
Okay.
Just the general blending, I tend to prefer the Pro Image Experts because they get it right more quickly. They tend to be able to have better eyes on things. But as far as doing detail work, the Image Solutions India is pretty amazing. I've had to do some stuff that I wasn't really sure was even possible. And it just, it comes back overnight and it's perfect. And so anyway.
Yeah, the do-overs are a real hang-up when it's not right, even though it's overnight service. But I did want to ask, are you always having to send them TIFF files and they return a JPEG, or will they return a TIFF that's layered, or what?
I send them raw files.
Okay.
To both? Raw brackets, unless it's a finished image that needs to be retouched. But for blending, I always send just raw files and they return TIFFs.
Okay.
And then the other one that does the custom retouch, I send them a TIFF and they return a TIFF. And they will return it as a layered TIFF if I ask them to.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for that. Sorry for interrupting.
So how do you do that, Alan? Does that go through Dropbox or something? I mean, when you're sending something that big, how do you? I
use WeTransfer.
You use what?
WeTransfer is the
WeTransfer.
Yeah, it's WeTransfer.com. That's a service I've used for quite a few years. I do have some clients that their network security doesn't like WeTransfer, and I have to use Dropbox when I deliver finished files. But for most everything, that's what I use. And I think you can send up to 20 gigs per transfer. So it works out pretty well for me.
I upgraded to the Pro one for like $12 a month, and you can send like 200 gigabytes in one file drop. So if you've got like a whole ton of processed 8-bit TIFFs that you need to send out, and that will do the job pretty easy.
What was the name of that service again?
That's the WeTransfer, but it's the WeTransfer Pro.
Pro, yeah, that's the one I have too. Is the WeTransfer?
Yeah, it's like $10 or $12 a month, and you can send
ridiculous.
Like 200 gig now.
Okay. Yeah, I do the annual plan, which gives you a huge discount, and I've been very happy with them. They're very fast and very reliable. And the nice thing is that it allows you to give an expiration date for each transfer, which is really nice. And then you can also go in and forward transfer links, the download links to multiple parties after the fact. So
yeah, it's a pretty good track on who's downloaded what, updates you, and tells you when they've hit the transfer button. And the thing I like about the Pro version as well is that you can personalize it, so it actually comes up with your own domain name. Mm-hmm. You can add all your own backgrounds and wallpaper and stuff and personalize it, so it looks more like it's your own professional FTP instead of just being like a free Dropbox account or something.
Yeah, exactly. And the wallpaper to me is really a nice feature because I change those out every month, those wallpapers, and I think it's 5 or 6 different wallpapers that rotate through as the person's downloading. So they get a look at what work you've been doing recently, which is really nice. I was curious to know about plugins and what everyone's using as far as Lightroom plugins and Photoshop plugins. Is there anything that's kind of a go-to that you use all the time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I only use plugins in Photoshop. My process is basically I just shoot raw, bring the raws back, process whatever I want through CaptureOne. And instead of using heavy HDR, I tend to bracket and then blend the brackets. And I use Lumenzia for my blending, which is a luminosity mask. And that gets back all of my lights, and I can use brackets to kind of blend it so you don't get any of those halos or weird marks that you tend to get.
Benjamin, what was that plugin you use?
Lumenzia.
One thing nice about that, it tends to take care of all those weird chromatic aberrations that you get, online.
Yeah, the thing that I like about it is that if you get like a good average exposure, you don't need to take a whole ton of exposures to get the bracket. You can just use CaptureOne to use that one shot, process out in a number of different exposures, and then blend those together instead of blending different shots where, like you said earlier, you may get ghosting from trees or leaves, but then like little dark rings when you start to brush in what's going in there. So using the one shot, I find works quite well sometimes if the situation allows it. But the only other ones that I use, what's it called? Topaz Labs. Yeah. I use Denoise, which is really good noise reduction. Doesn't overcook it and smooth everything out so it looks crappy and plastic. And because you can add a little bit of structure back into the file again once it's taken all the noise out. And the other one is their Topaz Labs sharpening. I find that's pretty good. I used to just use what's it called, a high pass filter in Photoshop. But I find that Topaz Labs one does just as good a job, and it's less effort.
I'm curious why you have noise in your shot. What are you shooting at?
I generally always shoot 100 ISO. So if I'm shooting longer, I got a 5 DSR. So I find that anything over about 4 or 5 seconds, you get a little bit more noise. And so when I use like a one shot, to avoid like the ghosts and stuff, when you push that up, then you'll start gain in the file.
Also, I have to say that because that's my camera also, if I really am pushing it on my brackets, I will get noise because I'll just beat the shit out of the images. But knowing that I can get rid of the noise later easily allows me to, I tell myself anyway, to put more time in on the front and then just remove the noise and boom, it's just gone.
Yeah, Benjamin, you don't like the CaptureOne noise reduction? I found that pretty good.
No, I've used CaptureOne now since it was like version 7. I think it's on like 14 now. I actually used to work for, I don't know if you guys remember Calumet, the camera company.
Yeah.
I was one of their digital managers for London and the Southeast back when I lived in the UK. And back before I gave all that a miss, I used to do a lot of the CaptureOne training with Phase 1. And I've always told them that I thought that their noise reduction isn't great because it just hammers the hell out of the file and it softens it up too much for me.
I'm in version 21 and it's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, it'll do it. I find that it doesn't work well. The reason I got the Topaz one and then switched out to it solely was because I have a Mavic 2 Pro, and that drone has got horrible noise on anything once the sun starts to set. So any kind of like twilight shot or anything like that, if I want to use it, I have to like hammer the shot. And it was at one point when I think CaptureOne wasn't reading DNGs properly. So I got into this third-party one, Topaz, and it's good. It does the job. You know, it's got a little bit more structure building back to it than I find the CaptureOne does, and I think you can get a free trial. I find that Black Friday tends to be a good time of year to pick up your software because I've got like stupid good deals on Topaz stuff, Lumenzia as well, and other bits and pieces. You know, I get good markdowns on stuff around that time of year. So a couple of weeks, we see all that stuff.
Yeah, actually, we have a 25% discount with Topaz software through AIAP. The discount code is AIAP 25. And, we negotiated that last year, and yeah, that's a great deal. I use the Denoise and the Sharpen. I batch process everything through those two. Everything that I send out goes through Denoise and Sharpen.
JPEG Mini is a good one if you guys need to like batch stuff out for clients. I deliver TIFFs, like 8-bit TIFFs, flattened, high-res JPEG and low-res JPEG. So then I pretty much like cover all their bases, and they like that because then they can just go straight to print, library, or web. And JPEG Mini is a good one for like batch dropping all of your higher res JPEGs. You can set like the longest edge to whatever you want pixel count, set up a folder to drop them all in. You literally just drag and drop, and it squeezes the hell out of the files without any loss of quality. I mean, there's obviously some somewhere. I think basically what it's doing is like, it's almost like it's saving into an 11 quality in Photoshop when you go to a JPEG option. But you'd be surprised how much it actually knocks out the file. I'll regularly have like a folder of like the 5DSR JPEGs, so usually are up sort of 40 to 50 megs each. When you drop them into JPEG Mini at like 2000 pixels on the longest edge, which is fine for most web pages, it'll knock them down to about 800 kilobytes from a 40 to 50 meg JPEG. And the quality's still great.
Well, I do that, but I don't. I use Lightroom for that, but I send it out at about 50%. This is what I was taught a long time ago by Peter Krogh. I don't know if those of you might be familiar with Peter Krogh, but he literally wrote the DAM book, the digital asset management book. So he's a reliable source. And he said, for the web, 50%, you're just not going to be able to tell the difference anything higher. And it does make it smaller. But I wanted to add something else that I don't know if you can do this in JPEG Mini, but in Lightroom, I have a preset for export so that when I send out one for the web and I send out one for printing, it appends at the end -print or -web. And I stick those in a folder that say web or print. And I've done it entirely because I just got tired of clients complaining to me. And I thought, I'm going to make it really easy for them. All they got to do is look at the file name and they'll see where it belongs. And it's just cut down any problems in that regard.
I do the same. I've always done that in Lightroom, as I send a web and a print JPEG.
Yeah.
I just have two presets. It's
really easy.
It takes 4 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can do now, there's, anyway, everything's getting better. Doesn't really, every software is better than it was last year.
Not Photoshop. Does anybody have a problem with CS20 with the Photoshop shutting down all the time? No. We have it. I mean, I have to me, the most bulletproof Photoshop is CS6 Suite, and I have it on my Power Macs. But on any of my iMacs, we've got the 2022 or the 2021 version. It's atrocious. They lock up all the time.
Do you use an external drive for the?
Yeah, everything's fed from a RAID.
No, I mean for the oh gosh, what are they?
Are you editing off of your RAID?
Yeah.
For the Scratch drive. Do you have a external Scratch drive?
Yeah, external Scratch. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, well, solid state. Like I work everything off of a solid state drive, and then my backup goes to a RAID. I wouldn't be working off that RAID. That's like you're crawling along there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just updated to the new M1 Mac Mini.
Oh, nice.
I got 3 Mac Pros sat here. They're all like topped out with like 80 gigs, and even had NVMe drives in there, all sorts. And I just got this Mac Mini for probably a third of what I've blown in, like just like average upgrades in RAM on each of these Mac Pro. It absolutely flies.
Yeah, I've heard those are really good.
Even with you, and it's only got 16 gigs of RAM in there. But the way that
that's not very much.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, like I said, all my Mac Pros had like a minimum of like 80 to 96 gigs of RAM in there. And it absolutely flies through everything. Like even like filters like surface blur and stuff like that. where it's like real GPU heavy. It just absolutely creams it. Like processing time is cut way down now.
Video people love the M1 also. I mean, they have these gigantic files they have to plow through, and they've really found the M1 to be very helpful.
So as a consensus, gentlemen, you think my Photoshop problem is because I'm serving from a RAID? I'm working and processing from a RAID?
With this.
I've never had a problem, up until Photoshop 2021. And now 2022 is just as bad.
Solid. And then every time it went into this cloud thing, I was actually in discussion with a couple of the engineers at Photoshop for the longest time because it would just fall over all the time. And I thought it was down to the size of my files, because by the time I get through a few layers, masks, all the rest of that stuff, some of my files before I flattened them, because I'm having to process them out in 16-bit instead of 8 for the luminosity masks to be properly effective. Like some of them before they were flattened down back down to 8-bit again at the end were like 2.5, 3 gigs in size for one image. And it was just beach balling, and then it would crash. And of course, even if you have your recovery set to 5 minutes, you're guaranteed to lose,
Yeah, it's frustrating. It is. Yeah. I've gone back to working primarily on CS6 on my Power Mac because the 2022 Photoshop is just.
You've probably got something else going on there. Like sometimes if like I have to go back to an image, I'll edit it off my RAID. It's just annoying because it's slow. It won't cause like crashing or anything like that. So I bet you've got something else weird cooking there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's on more than, it's not just on my particular computer. It's on my partner's computer. I mean, we've got and she's got the same problem. Her Power Mac runs great. The iMac, and their new iMacs, they just crash all the time with Photoshop. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, that would be unbearable.
Yeah.
You got the very latest installation on that as far as a Photoshop?
Yeah,
I'm just wondering maybe if you just did a reinstall of Photoshop, if that might solve things, if there's some fragments, because I know that there was a couple of previous updates I had some real issues with, and went back to prior versions. And then this latest update seemed to solve everything, but it was a reinstallation that really solved it for me.
Yeah, I'll try. But
it seemed to be so memory hungry on things, and if I had anything else running, it was a problem. I've got 128 gigs of RAM on this machine, and it still was having a hard time. So,
customer service at Adobe on the rare times that I've called them have actually been pretty helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I start sending nasty letters now when it's through filling the comments. They never call back, So, take my frustration out on some poor tech. Yeah, but I'll try that. I'll reinstall it. Maybe that'll work.
Don't send a nasty letter. Send them a case of beer. See if that helps.
It more flies with honey.
Yeah, that's true.
We touched on just a little bit about the files that we send. I mean, Barry mentioned this about what we send to clients and things like that. And just to me, that's been something that's I've had to kind of evolve over the years. I used to send them a TIFF, and then they didn't know what to do with that. So then I'd send them a TIFF and a JPEG. And then the JPEG was still too big. And so like Barry said, you have to kind of educate them about file size and things like that. But the problem that I ran into then after I've done that and said that these are web JPEGs, then I get a call back saying, this looks terrible. Look how fuzzy this is, and they still don't get it. I don't know what the solution is to that. But I know that I have fewer problems if I just send a TIFF and say, let your designer figure it out.
I use Dropbox for file delivery, and I give a media folder has a high rend, high def TIFF file, and then I have another folder that's it says web, and I have and pretty large JPEGs. All of this year, I've been sending them at 144 pixels instead of 72, and usually 2560 to 3000 wide for the JPEG. Because with I've noticed some people were complaining that the 72 pixels, 3000 wide weren't sharp on a Retina display. Depends on the display they have. So I've upped that to my business partner does web development, and she does all the ads for clients. And she said that should maybe be making them 144, and that's kind of solved that. So.
Yeah, I got that insight from a designer a year or so ago to double the width, double the size, pixel count of what I was doing, because I was sending out email and dropping images in, and they weren't sharp, and so I wasn't sending an email if my picture looked like that, and the solution was just to double the size of it.
Yeah, depends on the display. Yeah, if you're using a 1920 display, the 72 is fine, but these 4 and 5K displays, they need a higher pixel count. So
I think it also depends on, so for instance, my portfolio is on Photofolio, and he gets pissed off if you send Rob, if he's not pissed off, that you get a software warning if it's anything over 900 kilobytes. And he says, just send me 2000 pixel wide. You don't need to do anything bigger. And I'm thinking, I don't understand this. But then I realized software developers, 72 PPI, that's pretty ancient technology right there. So the software developers have figured out how to make that, work on these, Retina displays. And so I just kind of do that, and it seems to be okay. But, it's magic as far as I'm concerned. But size isn't everything. And so sometimes that smaller file just works fine,
It works out nice on the Retina display.
I think in terms of the Photofolio, they're doing some work on the back end for all the clients. So their assumption is that people are looking at the pictures on everything from a 32-inch display to a phone. And so it does a pretty good job of massaging the file. For myself, I deliver 2000 pixel wide images, maybe 1200, 1600 tall, 72 PPI, sRGB, always sRGB. And I haven't had too many complaints. And in fact, for the full res, I just sent them the biggest file I can dig out of it, also sRGB 300 PPI. And that seems to work for printing. Every now and then somebody wants a TIFF, and I'm happy to send that to them. But even at my editorial clients have been happy with the JPEGs.
Everybody using sRGB?
Yeah.
I shoot in Pro RGB and then convert to sRGB when I send it up.
Yeah.
I've got a number of clients.
I do everything in 98.
Yeah, I've got a number of clients who want to see the tip in Adobe RGB.
Yeah.
And some in CMYK. So,
well, if they want to work on them, an sRGB file is, you can't do much with it.
Yeah.
But I mean,
why anybody really needs an sRGB file anymore anyway? Because it used to be the browsers had their own inherent color space and wouldn't be able to switch. But Firefox, Chrome, Safari, they all have the ability now to read the metadata in whatever file is uploaded and whatever it's reading to be able to correct the color space anyway. So the old days of having to shift to sRGB because it was going to web, it really isn't needed anymore.
I still do everything in Adobe 1998.
Yeah, it's wider. I
like it better. Yeah.
It doesn't. It's like you're saying. It's not nearly as bad of an issue as it was, whatever that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But for printing files, sRGB just locks it down, so they can't. They're more likely to see what you wanted them to see, and if they're not going to process the photo, if they're not going to do anything to it, sRGB, even a full res JPEG, that works fine. Years ago, again, Peter Krogh was given a talk. It might have been the first day I met him, and he had 3 prints that he laid out on a floor that were like 30-inch prints. So they were pretty substantial. And he said one of these was printed as sRGB JPEG. One of these is ProPhoto, and one of these is Adobe 98. Pick the one you think, see if you can figure it out. Nobody could figure it out. They were virtually identical. So that was a big lesson to me, because in terms of printing, not in terms of the web, if it's done correctly, your workflow is correct all the way through, you're going to get a good result.
Yeah, I used to work with a guy when I first moved over here, and I left most of my clients back in the UK and had to start pretty much fresh when I moved to the States. So when I moved over here, I started off kind of kicking around with a guy, helping him out with his business that he started up, doing fine art prints. And he would print to like the Hahnemuller heavy rag, and do everything from like fine art architectural prints to wedding prints and stuff. And he would just run a rip that would convert everything. He'd just literally drag and drop any clients that sent images in. We would just drag and drop them into a rip. The rip would sort everything out to make the best use of the paper, stack everything out. It would do all the color correction, and then they're off and out of the, a large format Epson.
Yeah, I used that I had that on my Mac G4. 10 years ago, I had a RIP program, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
If you had a 60-inch printer, you could just load it, and it would use every inch of paper correctly.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, I asked, do you all know who Mac Holbert is? I feel like I'm name dropping a lot here. Well, at least name dropping as far as our little tiny community. Mac Holbert was half of Nash Editions. They helped invent digital printing. And I always like to follow that by saying they're first printers in the Smithsonian. So Mac now has a company with Stanley Smith, who used to run the digital lab at the Getty Museum. So the two pretty experts. And I bought a Canon printer, a Pro 1000, which made Mac a little unhappy because he's an Epson guy. And I was having some problems, and I said, "What RIP are you using?" And he said, "Well, I don't use a RIP." He said, "I just use the Mac the Mac dialog for printing." I mean, he obviously is, profiling his printers and his computers and all the rest of it. But he said, "Yeah, I just use that." He said, "Just keep it simple. You don't need to get fancy." And now, mind you, I'm not printing giant jobs where I have to fit all the images on a single piece of paper or anything like that. But that was kind of a moment for me when he told me that. And he's a friend, so he can be straight with me. Anyway.
Is everybody here making prints?
We do a lot of prints. We do a lot of wall art here. Yeah.
I haven't made a print for years.
It's a great
I can't get clients to ask for them. It drives me crazy. I have to give them to them as a gift. Yeah. I love to print.
I've got one client. She's a designer. She must have 35 pieces of wall art that we've done for her over the years.
Wow.
I mean,
nice.
You walk into our office, it's stunning. It's impressive. But I love printing. It's, I'd like to do more of it.
Yeah. There's nothing more real than a print.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to touch on one more thing before we get ready to wrap up here, and that's color profiling as far as calibration, monitor calibration, and those kinds of things. I'm just curious to know, first of all, if you are doing it, and secondly, if you're not, why not? But just what works for you, and how do you handle that in your workflow?
Yeah. I use an i1 Spider for mine, and I like the software. I've been using it for a decade, and it's simple, easy, and it's really accurate. So I can run my you can with the i1 you can calibrate your printer, and you can calibrate your monitor. So it's really nice.
I'm an i1. I think it's Calibrate now. They got bought.
They did. Yeah, they did.
Yeah. But it's the same. That's what I've been using. I hate their interface. It's clunky, and
you can't go wrong.
I met a rep once for them.
Are you using the basic or the advanced? Basic, and you're done. No, you got to use the advanced if you want any accuracy. But
it's so shitty. And I complained to their rep once, and she said, "I've had this argument with them for years. The engineers are not thinking about the customers." Well, fine, but it still does a good job, and you just sort of suck it up and get on.
Barry needs to be our TAC mascot.
Oh no, you have no idea how little I know.
No, but he needs to be the mascot for professionalism in TAC. Yeah.
Well, I can bitch really well, and because I teach professional practices, I had to learn the basics of just how to at least describe what to worry about.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm using the same, profile system and Spider. But the problem I run into is none of my clients have calibrated monitors, and I will invariably get a call from a new client who doesn't really understand the process and say, "Well, this doesn't look right on my monitor."
They're on a PC.
Yeah. On my Dell, and that's an interesting discussion. But I've been very happy with that product. Is there anybody using anything other than that they recommend? That seems to be kind of what the standard is here.
I think Spider itself has gotten better, but those are the only two, period, as far as I know. At least as far as the actual pucks, there's some various bits of software out there, but. Yeah, it's okay. My color management guy likes it. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Have anybody noticed how good Macs are right out of the box?
Yeah.
Right out of the box, those things it's amazing.
And, I used the Spider, whatever the thing was, like one time on my Mac when I got the thing out of the box, and it made like an incredibly minute difference.
Yeah.
And I haven't calibrated my monitor since, which I probably should, but I do so much correction in Photoshop. I don't know that it matters that much. I don't know.
My biggest concern is not necessarily color, but density. And so that's why I recalibrate as often as I do, because there seems to be a little drift no matter what you've got. And so, I worry about, because you always, we used to call it dot gain in printing, but you worry about that extra density that your client's going to see that isn't intended. And so I think profiling on a regular basis helps you avoid that. And I tend to even brighten things up just a little bit more than I probably would normally do for people that are going to go straight to the web with the work. So, because there's always some density gain there. It seems to be like 15-20% density gain on most situations where you post to the web, like Instagram or something like that. So,
well, I think also a lot of screens, non-professional screens, are just cranked up a little higher. That's just, and I'm on a decent screen. I've got a BenQ 27-inch monitor that I work on, and it wasn't expensive, and it doesn't drift very much, but I'm such a paranoid that if I've got a big job coming up, I'll just take 5 minutes and suffer through the software. And at least and even if it hasn't changed, at least I don't have to worry about whether it's changed or not.
Yeah. Good advice. Anything else is there something we've missed that we ought to cover before we wrap up here? This has been a great discussion. I sure appreciate everyone's input. Anything?
I wanted to mention one thing, that just going back to the beginning about client reviews. So one of the things that has happened through the pandemic in particular was for video production, because there's more money involved in it. So they figured out ways earlier than the rest of us, I think, to do virtual production. And there's a thing called an ACCSOON. It's ACCSOON. And it's a way to send video files wirelessly on a set to 4 or more iPads or something like that. And I think it also has and it's not terribly expensive, $300 or $400. And it's also a way that you can send it offline or onto the internet. I think they have a way to hook into an internet, even on a phone or something like that, for remote viewing it. And I haven't ever used it, but I imagine it works also with still images, and it's just something to consider. I don't know. I had forgotten about it. I wanted to mention it before we ended.
That's great. I'll have to look.
Well, the big dog, by the way, is Teradek. So if you want to know what the standard is, Teradek is it, and that's very expensive.
I think that stuff's all pulling like typically it's like SDI and video, but I think for your camera, it's probably pulling like the HDMI. It's more for like external monitoring on sets.
Oh, yes, totally for that. It's not really for us, but it might be, at least the Axoon might work for us if we were,
we got multiple people wanting to look at a preview.
Yeah. Because they had to keep people off the set. So they'd have to put them in another room or to be able to send which is nice. I think it's nice to have the customer in another room.
In that state.
I need to be alone in this space. Yeah,
I'm an artist. I must.
Well, yeah. I'm personally, I'm seeing a lot fewer clients on jobs than I ever have. It's been great.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I wanted to mention before we wrap up too that the traffic on the directory pages has kind of been blowing up. I hope that is translating into additional business and referrals for you. I'm not sure what happened in the last probably 6 weeks, but the bandwidth has increased dramatically on the AIAP directory, and so we're seeing just a lot of traffic. I'm hoping that's people that are looking for photographers and not photographers looking for photographers.
Photographers work to steal, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Alan, June Tang gave me a text, and he just wanted me to bring up for a subject for the future.
Yeah.
Could you bring up the topic of hiring assistants and interns, such as legalities, paperwork, workers' comp, etc.?
That's a really good one, because that's come up. When we first started talking, Norman and I, that we were talking about assistants and things like that. And I think that would be a great one to cover. For me, it's been really hard lately to find anybody to work. So yeah, internships are something that I used to do a lot with, and that was great, but I haven't for years. So excellent. I appreciate that, Norman. To everyone that's participated, thank you. This has been great. We've, I think, had a very profitable discussion here, and I appreciate your input and your willingness to share all of your information. This is kind of a rare thing professionally, and I really appreciate this. It'll be valuable to not only those that were here in person, but those that view this online. This will be up. Probably it's going to be about a week and a half before this hits YouTube. But at that point, I will also put some links in there. In the meantime, please email me if you have suggestions for corporate discounts, and also any feedback on a marketplace Facebook page, and also about adding your personal videos to our YouTube channel, or at least trailers for your videos. And I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, everyone have a nice Thanksgiving. Take care.
You too.
Businesses to everyone. Good to see you all again. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alan.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted and may not be used in full or in part without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.